What's your reaction when you see, it seems like you have a fan base and a support, like the everyday guy loves you. I mean, it seems like all over the league now, people are just kind of taking you. What's that kind of support and that affection like from the fans?
Well, I definitely appreciate it. I feel like it comes because I look like a ordinary person, and I feel like I give hope to everybody that is the same size as me. I'm not necessarily the most athletic, but with hard work, you can make it a long way. And I feel like I'm the prime example of that. That I never quit, and I'll keep going. And anything you put your mind to in life, you can accomplish it. So, I'm proud to give hope to those people.
Run into the tunnel. You have to go as fast as you can. You can trust me. It's real. It's real. Full speed, Kevin.
It's literally turning into worst case
the latest
scenario.
data tells us that we're dealing with essentially
It's literally turning into worst
I'm
case
afraid
scenario.
that the latest data tells us that we're dealing with
Literally
essentially
turning
a worst
into
case
worst
scenario.
case scenario.
I'm afraid that the latest data tells us that we're
literally
dealing
turning
with
into
essentially a worst
worst
case
case
scenario.
scenario.
I'm afraid that the latest data
literally
Think, but you can tell if someone's lying. You can sort of feel it in people. And I have lied. I'm sure I'll lie again. I don't want to lie. I don't think I'm a liar. I try not to be a liar. I don't want to be a liar. I think it's like really important not to be a liar.
Specialization should make you suspicious. It should, because if it's gotten harder to evaluate what's going on, then it's presumably gotten easier for people to lie and to exaggerate, and then one should be a little bit suspicious, and that's sort of my starting bias.
I get up I'm Dr. Ryan Cole. I'm an MD. I'm a physician. Mayo Clinic trained anatomic clinical pathology, subspecialty fellowship in dermatopathology. I do molecular biology. I've done over 150,000 COVID tests in my laboratory.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. This is Gigaohm Biological, a high-resistance, low-noise information brief brought to you by a biologist. These people are on stage together, and if you want to get your kids out, you got a few months left, you got a few years left to get your kids out of this trap. That's the reality of it. I don't like to be that message guy. I don't want to do this on an Easter, but I've got a free Sunday, and I haven't been made to see this for nothing. I have not been gifted this royal flush of a hand for nothing. It is because we have this one chance to see the stage. We have this one chance to see the Lollapalooza of liars as clearly as it has ever been visible in recent history. Our parents never had a chance to see it like we can see it. Our parents never understood that their consciousness was already prime real estate when they were young. And certainly our parents don't understand it now, but we can. Because we are a generation that grew up understanding that everything wasn't as we were told on television, that we could see things that they lied about. But now you need to understand that this has expanded. It's gone all total. There is no truth available on television. There is no truth available on social media that isn't obfuscated and distorted enough to be useless. Gigaohm Biological represents some kind of hope in this simply because we are trying to find the truth, simply because we are trying to rule out the implausible and the impossible, simply because we are trying to acknowledge all the people that came before us with these ideas, fighting these things to try and figure out how long has it been since this mythology has been our trap? How long have we been trapped here? Ladies and gentlemen, since I was a little kid, I've had a dream of maybe being a basketball player someday, and so I'm trying to take advantage of this situation and get myself back in shape and to start teaching biology on the basketball court. That is coming very soon, although it does take a certain degree of physical fitness in order to do that effectively, and so that's what I've been working on in the background, in addition to trying to get a basic biology book done, which is not an easy task. But I am very excited to tell you that I am making progress on all sorts of fronts, including an incredible amount of reading. Am I cutting to the right one? There we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. This is Gigaohm Biological, a high-resistance, low-noise information brief brought to you by a biologist in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the back of his garage. Happy Easter, everyone. It is the 20th of April, 2025. I think the 20th of April is also significant for some other reason. It's 420, I guess, is one of the reasons why it's significant. Anyway, however you decide to celebrate this day, please celebrate it with truth. Please celebrate it with your kids. Please try to make a connection between generations and between the people that you love, and celebrate that community, celebrate that fellowship, celebrate that common, desire. Remember that in 100 years from now, everyone on this planet is going to be dead. And so it doesn't really matter all the things that you cheer about and which team you rooted for. It's going to matter more about what you leave for your children and what children you leave behind and what they think and know, what they dream about. And so to all the people out there that decided not to have kids because you skillfully used social media or the malevolent messaging in mainstream media made you think that that was the right choice, I assure you, the simple fact that in 100 years, everyone living on this planet will be dead is the reason why that's a lie. The only thing we really have to contribute to the future are the children that we leave behind, because of the simple fact that at best we are a 100-year candle that burns quickly. can be blown out in an instant. And so more than anything, I know for sure that I'm not going to waste another minute of my life pursuing the needs of a boss or the desires of a boss, but I am on a multi-generational time horizon now, trying to make sure that my children are prepared to raise children that can end this nonsense. And so that's the kind of hope that I'm trying to bring to the table. Gigaohm is not for everyone, but it is for anyone in pursuit of the truth. And the truth really revolves around you and I understanding and our children understanding that this is for all the marbles. This is for the children of Earth. And our children need to understand it's not just about Snapchat and social media. It's about the generation that comes after the generation that acquiesces to that. And so we are at a pivotal moment in human history where the destruction of whatever the West is imminent, and it is intentional, it is designed, it is a controlled demolition that is taking advantage of an anticipated rise in all-cause mortality to create a mythology. And it has put actors in place in order to curate that mythology. And some of those actors have interests in power or in fame or in fortune. Many of those actors are very unwittingly involved because they're not sophisticated enough to understand the web of lies that they've been brought up to understand and the web of lies that they are now employed to reinforce. But I assure you there is a very simple explanation for what happened during the pandemic, and it is only a spectacular commitment to lies that is required in order to sustain it. That is the main issue that we have here. Pure oxygen causes acute respiratory distress syndrome. So anyone that went to the hospital in 2020 or 2021 and was first given at the door supplementary oxygen could have potentially developed the symptoms that were called COVID simply by that one treatment choice, fueled by a narrative of running out of ventilators or the stopping of spread with masks, or the simple narrative that people like the FLCCC and Peter McCullough and Pierre Corey and Ryan Cole all perpetuated with this idea that we should use these pulse oximeters that you can get on Amazon to measure whether or not we have COVID. And if it goes down to 96 or so, you better go to the hospital. And so I don't think that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is sophisticated enough to understand how thorough the Truman Show is that he is experiencing, how many of these people are on a script that he's unaware of, how many of these people are singing harmonious lies to him so that he thinks he's just regurgitating what all these experts have told him and doing his best to try and rise to the destiny that whatever these people have convinced him his destiny is. But he does not understand the basic biology. And if he does, then that makes him a traitor. And we need to be honest with ourselves in 2025 on Easter at this kind of the start of spring. We need to understand something here. That even if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not a fake anti-vaxxer, the people that are behind him most certainly are. And it is their unblemished track record of making no progress for the last decades that makes it obvious. They have been put in place to control the public health narrative. They were put in place decades ago. And many of the ones that are currently in front of us right now are curiously former prominent Democrats, Hillary voters, even people that have gotten grant money from Democratic administrations or served in Democratic administrations for Democratic appointed heads of these agencies. We are talking about traitors and liars that are willing to do these things in order to be a part of the controlled demolition of America and to position themselves in positions of power and fame and fortune at the end of it. Some of them were brought into small rooms and told that, if you don't choose this, then someone else will. So they said, well, I might as well. At least I'll get a book out of it. I don't think any of them understood that there would be a guy like me that would figure it out and start insisting that people just tell the simple truth. I don't think any of these people anticipated that someone would see through the chorus of liars, the Lollapalooza of liars that these people have put together, put in place, and financed for them to be out there for 5.5 years, longer even. It's not a message that everyone is prepared to hear. But the truth is absolutely simple, ladies and gentlemen. You must participate in order to sustain it. Transfection and transformation in healthy people was always a crime. And lying about it makes it worse. RNA cannot pandemic. There's no biological basis for this principle, except for a few stories about special enzymes and special viral proteins that have not in any way, shape, or form been proven to support such a ridiculous idea. And finally, intramuscular injection is dumb. It's kind of a hard and abrasive statement that a lot of people don't like, but I assure you it is important to use it because it challenges anyone to try and refute it. And anyone that actually starts their gears turning will see that this is actually a pretty difficult statement to refute, and it's not so obvious. And that's how we win. We get out of their slave speak. We stop arguing about the effectiveness of vaccines or the danger of adjuvants, and we start arguing about the fact that intramuscular injection of any combination of substances with the intent of augmenting the immune system is dumb. We start to argue about the fact that calling them investigational vaccines, as both sides did, as all sides did, was part of the illusion that they should have called them transfections and transformations. And anyone that can be demonstrated to have reasonably known that terminology before the pandemic is essentially a traitor if they have risen or become prominent in social media not saying these words. Like Brian Hooker and like Kevin McKernan, two guys with over 20 years of genetic modification experience in plants. Both of them know that transformation and transfection is a way to express proteins in plants, even a way to alter the genome of plants. Brian knows that. He had over 16 years of experience prior to 2013 in the modification of plants to produce medicines. Kevin McKernan is the foremost authority on the genomic analysis of marijuana and its bending toward personalized medicine. Think about this. These two guys alone being prominent for 5 years and reinforcing all of the state narrative about COVID. The effectiveness of PCR, the neutralizing antibodies, the asymptomatic spread. The fact that the FDA is in the way. This is not a mistake. This is a single group of meddlers on a unified script. And that unified script is primarily designed to make sure that there is no useful resistance to the U.S. vaccine schedule, no useful awakening to the idea that the vaccine schedule in America in particular is obviously criminal when compared to any other vaccine schedule in the developed world. Full stop. If you can see that anybody in Australia, anybody in the UK, anybody in the Netherlands, anybody in Denmark, anybody in Norway that really wanted to wake America up to the fact that we are being attacked internally by traitors, and it's been for decades, could simply say, wow, you know, America, you should compare your vaccine schedule to Norway, to the Netherlands, to Holland, to Denmark, to anywhere in the developed world, and you will find a weird contradiction. Because America's kids aren't the healthiest. Americans' kids are not the smartest. America's health outcomes are not the best. And our vaccine schedule is incredibly different. And that simple fact That simple biology that underlies these theaters can be learned, and it can be learned by everyone because it's relatively simple, because it's close to common sense, because it is for all the marbles. It is for the grandchildren of Earth. That is the exact reason why there's an American fake vaccine movement, a fake anti-vaccine movement that has gone international, a fake anti-vaccine movement that has its roots in the original fake anti-vaccine movement of Polly Tommy and Andrew Wakefield in the late 90s in the UK, including 90 billboards in a bra trying to get awareness of autism, but not stop it or prevent it or cure it. Just establish that it's real and that we should have more education about it, and that autism can sway voters. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the truth is available because they haven't made progress. If Polly Tommy was on billboards in 1999 and 2000 trying to draw awareness to autism, but not in any way trying to stop another child from suffering from this debilitating condition, you can see what's going on. She got to meet the Prime Minister. There's no progress there. There's 20 years of profiteering and fame and magazine pictures and book tours and movie tours. This is a fake anti-vaccine movement, and you can see it if you go back to 2013 when Brian Hooker, his son was hurt, and he wouldn't use the word autism. And that same guy now is part of the fake anti-vaccine movement because in 2020 he said everything he was told to say. And in 2021, he said everything he's told to say. In 2022, he said everything he was told to say, presumably because I guess he knew that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was going to be running for president, and it was just a matter of time before they got their guy in position, and then they would score all the touchdowns. So let's just make a big top tent of health freedom right now. You start using the word autism, not like in 2013 when you knew what you were talking about, 16 years of molecular biology experience modifying plants to make medicines. No, let's just make a big top tent of health freedom because we don't really want to save any kids. We just want safe vaccines. And we want Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the White House to give us those fake vaccines, safe vaccines, right? Right, Brian? That's why we're here in 2025 with Brian Hooker still thinking that he's solving something, with Polly Tommy still pretending like she's fighting something, with Mary Holland still pretending like she's fighting something by taking $250,000 salary every year and actually doing nothing. Contrast that to Brandy Vaughn, who went from being a skeptic in 2015 to being able to succinctly compare injection versus ingestion. A mom with an unvaccinated child didn't need to be convinced by her child being injured, temporarily associated with an injection. She got convinced because she saw her son was healthy and felt guilty about it, and then was being mandated to give her son something that she didn't think she needed. And then she discovered the autism thing, the vaccine thing, the lies. And then she met Brian Hooker and Polly Tommy and Suzanne Humphreys and all these people who completely ignored her very advanced understanding of this mythology and her very advanced ability to describe the contradictions in this mythology. Instead, Brandy Vaughn died on December 7th, 2020, and these people are still getting paid more than $200,000 a year to not say there's a big difference between injection and ingestion. That's what a fake anti-vaccine movement does. Brian Hooker would not say the term autism in 2013. I think because he understood that autism was bullshit in 2013. That's why in February 2003, there are girls and boys on about autism on the front of Newsweek. Yeah, 10 years before Brian Hooker would not say it's autism anymore. I don't use the word autism was on the front of Newsweek 10 years before Brian Hooker said I won't use the word autism because it's not. It's a neurological injury due to vaccines. Can you see it yet? The illusion of autism, the mythology of autism has been in construction for decades. And it has been in construction in parallel with a fake anti-vaccine movement that was going to prevent a useful progression to understanding what, for example, Brandy Vaughn tried to teach us in 2016, 17, 18, 19, and 20 before she died. An employee of Merck. You know who else works for Merck? You know who else made a lot of money with Merck? Paul Offit made a lot of money with Merck because his rotavirus vaccine is produced by Merck. You know who else made a lot of money with Merck? Robert Malone brokered a Ebola vaccine to Merck. I mean, we are talking about some weird red threads that run through all these people that are protecting the childhood vaccine schedule, which is incidentally dominated by Merck.
Stop lying!
So this guy with an injured son in 2013 named Brian Hooker won't use the word autism, but in 2020, not only will he use the word autism, but he'll tell you that it kind of might have coincided with giving vaccines when my kid was sick, which is now actually what Suzanne Humphreys is saying 5.5 years later on the Joe Rogan podcast and on the CHD podcast that she's on now. That's zero progress. That's no progress. Since 2013, Brian has made no progress in saving anybody. None. No messaging change. Didn't learn a damn thing from his friendship with Brandy Vaughn, even though he made 2 movies with her. And instead, in 2020, at the end of 2020, you can find podcasts where he is just reinforcing the narrative that Tony Fauci gave him, that Kevin McKernan gave him, that Robert Malone gave him, that Mary Holland insisted that he read. Asymptomatic spread my ass, neutralizing antibodies my ass. Underpowered vaccine studies, Brian. And this guy hired me a couple years later and pretended not to know it then too. What's transfection again, Jay? So the fake anti-vaccine movement is populated by a bunch of people, not just CHD and ICANN and people that pretend to be against one or more of the shots or want to retest them or think about placebo or even, the adjuvants. It's also populated by fake health freedom people that are totally no-vax, like this guy right here, Tom Cowan, who had a book in 2018 called Vaccines, Autoimmunity, and the Changing Nature of Childhood Illness. Let me make one thing absolutely clear. If these people believe that the vaccine schedule is poisoning roughly 9,000 kids a day, they're not doing a whole hell of a lot. If they've known since before 2018 that vaccines were poisoning thousands of kids a day, damaging thousands of kids a day, that we are under some kind of apocalyptic, sort of genocidal, they're killing us. They're poisoning children. Then it should be an all-in. It should be a full court press. It should be a no holds barred, no punches pulled kind of thing. But for 25 years, it has slowly evolved from autism awareness to maybe it's the MMR, maybe we should do separate MMRs, maybe it's the adjuvants, is it aluminum or thimerosal or mercury, or which form of mercury is it? And these same assholes have been arguing with each other for more than 20 years. Mary Holland, Paul Offit, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Measles, MMR, Wakefield, and Peter Daszak of EcoHealth Alliance have publication on measles together. It's all one fake anti-vax movement that opposes medical mandates, that advocates for free speech and free choice, wants safe vaccines, and never actually gets to the heart of the matter, which is the biological truth that intramuscular injection of any combination of substances with the intent of augmenting the immune system is dumb. And we're supposed to believe that despite all of these people having books, and multiple books sometimes, they still haven't managed to distill it down to the absolute truths. They haven't been able to succinctly explain how the immune system in your body is organized, how the microbiome is organized, so that we can understand why intramuscular injection of any combination of substances with the intent of augmenting the immune system would be dumb. Instead, they have focused on meaningless arguments and hamster wheels that have extended this to 5 years of nonsense, while there was almost 3 full years of murder where they could have said something, where they could have, lost a job at a medical school? Nope. Lost a job at a hospital? Nope. Just sold books, started businesses, gone on world tours. None of these people can claim to have actually acted like somebody should act if they believe what they say they believe. If you really think that the childhood vaccine schedule needs to be ended, then it's not a 10-year plan to get somebody in the White House and then do it. That's traitorous. That is cowardly. That is weak. And that's where they are. That's what this is about, because it's much bigger than that. It can't possibly be just getting Bobby Kennedy in the White House, Brian Hooker. It can't possibly be just getting Bobby Kennedy in the White House with Kevin McKernan, with Robert Malone, with Meryl Nass, with Claire Craig, with Jessica Rose, with Peter McCullough, with Pierre Corey, with Ryan Cole. These people's 5-year track record reveal a theater. And it must be a theater coordinated by Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan, because these are the only 2 people with the requisite experience, connections, and past mentors that lead them right to being these guys that are getting ready to take advantage of a once in a multi-generational time frame where there will be enough people to sample, enough variation to sample, enough data collection to be had, and the infrastructure in place to collect that data once in a millennium. There will never be 10 billion people on the planet using cell phones again. There will never be 10 billion people on the planet using cell phones again. That's the truth. Never be 10 billion people on the planet that would be available for an implant at birth. Never will there be this many experimental animals available again. And so they have to collect the data, because their story that they've been telling each other for the last 100 years or so is that at some point there will be a computer and then they can do it. They can become gods themselves. They can learn to take control of the evolution of the species. And that is why an actor like Anthrax, Meryl Nass, or Merck, Ebola, Ditra, David Hone, Robert Malone would be involved, or Miss 5 post-secondary degrees would be involved, or 100,000 Genomes Project would be involved, or the research and development director of the Human Genome Project, or a Solvay colleague of this guy, or some MIT professor who's supposedly really speaking out about glyphosate. And autism. Don't forget, she's also spoken out about autism, thinks it's glyphosate. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but these people have been put in place. And the American populace is being spellbound by them. Whether or not you believe them and you're fighting with them and you're donating money to these people, or you think that all of these people are nuts, you have been fooled. By design. It is imperative that everybody in America, regardless of what hat you think you're wearing and what team you think is winning, that you understand that both teams are losing. Both teams are traps. Both sides of this narrative is nonsense. And the gears don't mesh because you're on both sides of the line. everybody believes some things on both sides of the line, but imagines that they're really predominantly red or blue. And this was all done on purpose. And much of the confusion, the frustration, the contradiction that people are holding in their heads is about this shit, about this nonsense, about these lies. And so if you want to see it, you need to acknowledge it right now. You need to acknowledge it right now. You need to acknowledge it right now. Ladies and gentlemen, this work is only supported by viewers like you. The book that's going to come out is only going to be free. And so if you want to think about this stream as just being kind of a placeholder right now for all the other work that I'm doing, I've never read more in my life, and I have such an extreme focus on where I'm going right now that it's hard to do a stream like this. And so I apologize that I'm not on more. I know that that's, for a lot of people, it's nice to just have a show there to watch because there isn't much on the internet anymore. But I think it's now become imperative that I finish this Biology 101 story at a high school level, at a high school teacher level, and get this PDF done and out, even if it's never going to be published, even if it's only just for free. And then we can start going forward with Biology 101 in a way where these big ideas won't necessarily be able to be obfuscated, able to be diluted, or able to be lost, and we can really just pass this on to our kids. I'm really confident that we're going to be able to do it, but the only way that we're going to be able to do it is because of all the people that support this stream. And so for every one of you that has given $10 or $5 or even $2, I can't thank you enough for your belief to click. We do need more support, but I'm also getting a couple day jobs now to make sure that it's just got to be done. And if streaming every day isn't going to get people to, subscribe for whatever reason, I don't subscribe to anyone either. So it's the book's got to be written. The new biology's got to come out. And if you want it to come out right, you've got to understand that these people are on stage together. We can't change their script. And so if we drop this ball and allow them to obfuscate and to distort the ideas that we're trying to put out, they could still win. And so I think it's got to be available so that when it's ready, and when people want it, they can have it. And it doesn't have to be something where, again, they have to look for the stream or look for the clip. It's got to be something that people can download and hold. And that's where I'm going. So I want to explain something here while my voice is still with me. The team worst case scenario is actually a many separate teams that have been revealed in plain sight. And it is an illusion of consensus that they create by working together, by getting each other's back. And when we were talking about Brian Hooker last week or the week before, Brian Hooker was on a stream at the end of 2020 where he was doing what I would call a callback exercise with someone by the name of Dr. Kendra. And basically they were asking each other questions that they already knew were coming in a kind of act to make it seem like that they were having a consensus agreement about certain basic principles of the COVID pandemic. And so, Brian Hooker might say, Dr. Kendra, what do you know about asymptomatic transmission? And then Dr. Kendra would answer that question with a Fauci-like answer, and then throw it back to Brian and say, what do you know about B cells, Brian? Isn't that B cells or T cells? And then Brian would say something. And so the illusion that the internet allows to be created is a group of people can go on Zoom and agree on something, and that's an illusion of consensus. It's like being in a room with four people, and those four people talking about, I don't know, a car that's in the garage. And if you're not a mechanic or you're not familiar with what car is in the garage, you kind of just have to listen along and try to understand what they're talking about as they talk with each other. And what that can do is convince you that there's a certain car in the garage with a certain set of wheels and a certain amount of modifications and maybe a problem and a certain leak. And when you open the door, there might not be any car at all in the garage, but it's the agreement between the three people that were standing outside of the garage, and their vivid explanation, and they're correcting each other. No. It wasn't the left cylinder that leaked. It was the right cylinder that leaked, but it's the C joint in the left side. Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry. And so they have all these details and all this amazing understanding about the car that's in the garage. And it turns out there isn't a car in the garage at all, but it's their convincing banter, their limited spectrum of debate, and their knowledge of the details, their confirmation of these details with one another that creates the illusion of consensus. And I'm about to show you something that I found on BitChute that will absolutely positively blow your mind. Now, I don't know if I put it in the chat there. I don't know if this video was originally released on April in 2022, but it was posted on BitChute in April of 2022. And so I'm just going to it now. And again, I want to remind you that this is a video with Tom Cowan. And Tom Cowan has a book in 2018 by Chelsea Green Publishing, which is, I don't know if they're good guys or not, but they publish a lot of this stuff. Vaccines, Autoimmunity, and the Changing Nature of Childhood Illness. Supposedly, he understands that vaccines are poison in 2018, that thousands of children are being poisoned, that thousands of pregnant women are being poisoned, that thousands and thousands of elderly people are being poisoned every day. So much so that he wrote a book about it in 2018. And now in 2022, after 2 full years of murder in America, this is what Tom Cowan and his colleagues have to say.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Street MD versus the other doctors, including Drs. Tom Cowan, Andrew Kaufman, and Dr. Mark Bailey. Now, Dr. Bailey, word has it that Samantha had some more important things to attend to.
Yeah, sorry about that, Joe. We were hoping to both attend today, and we're delighted, but it's school holidays here, so we got the whole team at home, including our 8-month baby. So one of us had to stay upstairs and keep an eye on the troops. But yeah, I'm not quite as pretty as Sam, but hopefully I can do an equal job on dismantling the virology for you.
I'm totally fine with it. It's just the viewers on Iconic, man. These guys are wild when it comes to their science. So I'm sure they'll be understanding as well. But right now, there's a war on science. And one of the things that I feel like is I'm actually at the Hard Rock Hotel in Mexico. And I saw a sign, a little artwork by John Lennon. And it said, the more I see, the less I know for sure. And that's how I feel right now. To start off, may I just play you a little segment from great scientists around the world have concluded via controlled studies that not only COVID-19, but viruses in general have never been isolated following a correct and proper scientific method and have never been proven to be contagious. Can you please speak on this?
I disagree strongly. The virology here is well established.
Okay, so let's just make sure you understand what you see here because it hasn't been seen very often. This is Ryan Cole. 150,000 tests in my office, Ryan Cole. This is the spike protein of the virus is causing cardiac problems, and collaborator with Jessica Rose in 2021, Peter McCullough, also the chief medical officer of the Wellness Company, who Robert Malone told me was a bad guy at the inaugural CHD conference in 2022, and that the Wellness Company was bad guys. But here they are, all on the same podcast together, talking about Andrew Kaufman's idea of that there are no viruses. So weird.
We have observed the agent. We have cultivated the agent. We have used the agent in infectious animal models. I'm not sure where this discussion thread comes from. Viruses are real. They can be easily demonstrated. They can be cultivated in the laboratory. They can be stored. They can be passaged. They meet all the criteria of Koch's postulates. There is the issue that it's difficult to reproduce the human disease in various animal models. And so sometimes that's considered to fail to meet Koch's postulates. But in my experience and that of many, many colleagues, This is a isolated virus. It can be reproduced in the laboratory to high titers. It can be purified, and it can be used to infect cells in animals.
That response got a lot of people really pissed off, and they demanded that Doctors Cowan, Kaufman, and even Samantha Bailey come on, which we're happy to have you, Mark.
So are we really to believe that a panel composed of Robert Malone and Ryan Cole, who had toured the United States Christian churches, presenting Li Ming Yan as a whistleblower, that's a spontaneous assembly with Peter McCullough, the guy who has been collaborating with Jessica Rose on cardiology and hydroxychloroquine in hearts or something like that, that those people requested these people in particular come and explain the opposite? And we are supposed to believe that it's between these two teams, that these two groups of people are the primary, sort of potential saviors of our society. Going to save us from the globalists. Going to save us from Bill Gates and Peter Daszak. Remember, these are supposed to be three doctors who have known for years that the medical system in America is corrupt. That the medical system in America is corrupt. So much so that Tom Cowan had a book in 2018 about the vaccine schedule. And yet, how will he open this? Will he talk about the 2 years of murder that have occurred and how that 2 years of murder happened? Will he talk about it at all? Or will he only talk about isolation, purification, and culturing of viruses? And never once get to, well, if vaccines are poison, what should we do about it, Tom? And that's how you can see he's a liar and a traitor.
So, Dr. Cowan, I'm sure you have a lot to say about that response.
I have a drawer in my kitchen, and it has a bunch of silverware, and it has a corkscrew and a knife and a spoon and a bunch of other things, and it has one cork top in it, the kind you put on olive oil and other things. If anybody who's actually thinking about this would say, can you isolate the cork top from...
Does this sound like a guy who's had a book since 2018? That's 5 years. A book that supposedly says the vaccine schedule is poison. If the vaccine schedule is poisoning thousands of kids a day, don't you think he should start a little better than with an analogy about a utensil drawer? Don't you think that by now, after 2 years of speaking out about something, he would have a message better than an analogy about a utility drawer? Holy shit, can you imagine him saying, well, the vaccine schedule is fake. And so they are murdering people and lying about it in order to make sure that our kids and most parents never wake up to the fact that what I've known already for many years is the vaccines are just poison. Can you imagine the difference between that and what this jackass has been saying for 5 years straight on almost every podcast he's ever done?
The drawer and find out what it's made of, what is composed of, and what it does. Every single human being would say, okay, they would go in the drawer, they would take only the cork top out, and then they would do analysis of the chemistry and find out what it does.
There's simply no explanation for how stupid this is other than he is a traitor. There's no way that someone can have an MD and a practice and patience and write a book like this and then talk this much stupid shit in 2022. There's no way. This is a fake anti-vaxxer, a traitor to all American children. If I ever see this guy in person, I'll have a hard time not knocking him out.
by everybody's definition who speaks English, that is the definition of isolation. And that has never been done for any virus. Number one.
These are three MDs who are
Hello, everyone.
unable, three MDs who are unable, after years of being skeptical. Mark Bailey was so skeptical, he apparently stopped practicing medicine. So skeptical that he writes something called Farewell to Virology. But nowhere in there do these three MDs ever get around to saying, you know what, intramuscular injection of any combination of substances with the intent of augmenting the immune system is dumb because there are no viral diseases, because viruses are fake, because they've never... Do you see? Do you see why the logical action is not being taken? If you believe that vaccines are poison and that every child that is injected and is not obviously damaged got lucky, then this is not the tact. Joining the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. campaign for president and selling hats is not the tact. Building a big top tent of health freedom is not the tact toward winning. It's just not. It is throwing away your career. It is speaking out as clearly as possible, and it is saying it as succinctly as possible, as often as possible, until the vaccine schedule in America is ended. And they are not doing that by design. These people are the people that they are arguing with by design because they were put in place to protect the very vaccine schedule that I am trying to explain to you is criminal. And it is criminal because it is biologically ridiculous to think that we can augment a healthy human with intramuscular injection of any combination of substances. How many different ways can we say it?
Or measles or chickenpox or something. They minimally filter it or centrifuge it. They immediately then mix it with a culture which has other particles and genetic material.
Another way to think about it is, do you think it's more important to convince people that virology has a lot of weird, silly experiments or a lot of weird direct and indirect observations or a lot of misinterpreted observations? Do you think it's more important to explain that to people, or would it be more important to explain to people why the fundamental idea of intramuscular injection of medicine is dumb? As an MD or an MD or an MD. But instead, these MDs with patients are focused on virology terms, virology semantics, and perhaps misinterpreted biological observations or misconstrued or exaggerated biological observations without ever getting to the conclusion that vaccines are then a lie, a criminal enterprise, and we should just stop it all.
In COVID case, they mix it with green monkey kidney cells. Then they put antibiotics, which are specifically toxic to the kidney, meaning amphotericin and gentamicin. Then they withdraw the nutrients. They add fetal calf serum, also a source of identical particles and genetic material. And then they see what happens. And what happens is the monkey kidney tissue breaks down into thousands of little particles. And they say that is the isolation of the virus.
Now, unfortunately, he's not totally correct. And this is another reason why he is an obvious liar. Because the other major way that RNA virology is done is by the manufacturing of a pure DNA clone of the said sequence that they found. And now I'm not suggesting that this is virology. However, I am suggesting that his limited explanation of how virology is done is by design. Because if he really wanted to arm you with the truth, he would explain to you that the vast majority of virology isn't even done by isolating a sample and then growing it on culture with antibiotics. They don't need to do any of that shit. If they start with an infectious clone, a large pure quantity of DNA, and pretend that that's an equivalent to virology. And that is a fundamental lie that I tried to explain to these people in this year of 2022 when I finally started to figure it out. And then these people attacked me, all 5 together in one video, and tried to debunk the infectious clone idea without ever really talking about it. Just saying that unfortunately Jonathan Couey didn't provide any papers, so I guess he's full of shit. This same guy, who apparently in 2018 knew it was bad enough to write a book about it, is just simply unable to explain it. It's by design. He's a traitor. He's a criminal. He's an actor.
That is the only way they
awful.
have isolated viruses, and that is a English language and scientific fraud, period. Because we now know that
and the consequences of that are that the vaccine schedule is criminal. Why doesn't Tom Cowan ever say that? It's that simple. He could stop right there and say that and then say, that's why I wrote the book in 2018. The reason why Tom doesn't say that is not because he's just kind of dumb. It's because he's on a script. He's part of a fake anti-vax movement. He's no different than Mary Holland.
Breakdown of the tissue happens with nothing from the COVID patient or the measles patient or the chickenpox added. It's simply a result of starving and poisoning kidney cells and then showing that they break down. We have proof from Ender's paper. We have proof from Stefan Lanka's work, etc. Now, the next thing they do is they show you pictures of these particles and they say, see, that's SARS-CoV-2 or measles, etc. We know.
Still hasn't saved a single kid from the vaccine schedule. Still hasn't really convinced anybody of anything, I don't think.
That you cannot tell in an electron microscope whether that's just the breakdown particles from kidney cells or some so-called exogenous virus. In other words, all these particles that they're claiming are isolated viruses are just the breakdown of the kidney tissue or the fetal calf serum or whatever tissue they're growing it on. And then finally,
it couldn't be that they figured out that the N protein actually causes the packaging of RNA and the formation of exosomes, for example. It couldn't possibly be that. It couldn't possibly be that there's some endogenous mechanism of genetic packet information that could be hijacked or misconstrued as something that it wasn't in an electron micrograph. It's just got to be breakdown because, of course, the next part of their narrative is that there are no diseases that are caused by viruses. And that's just impossible. Unless you mean by the Vincent Racaniello and Tony Fauci viruses, then that's fine. And that's the misconstrued and obfuscated truth that these people are employed to hide.
They sequence this. Actually, they don't sequence it because they never have a genome to start with. And if you don't have a genome to start with, you can't sequence it. So they do what's called alignment, which is cutting all these little pieces together up. And they have no idea whether the pieces come from a so-called virus or from the kidney tissue or fetal calf serum or something else in the snot of the person.
Oh, and don't want to mention, bacteria and bacteriophages, even though these two entities are almost immeasurably complex and immeasurably loud in the background. He just didn't mention them. Other stuff in the snot? You mean by bacteria and bacteriophages. You see, those are two things that these people never disagree exist. And bacteriophages are bacterial viruses. They are the most abundant packet information around. The biological packet information that we are surrounded by, that some people have called or named viruses, by far the most abundant of that packet information are all kinds of different shaped bacteriophages, many of which are spheres. Not the little moonlander shaped phages that they show you from the Hershey experiments and the Delbruck experiment. No. Most of them are round, indistinguishable under an electron microscope from any of these other so-called particles. Not that wrong in that sense, what Tom Collins says, but the point is that if he's known for 5 years that the vaccine schedule is criminal, then why not at some point very early in your interview tell everybody that that's why, or the consequences of there being no viruses or no diseases caused by viruses is that the vaccine schedule is therefore criminal. They can't get there because they are part of the script.
And they piece it together. They, in their mind, mentally come up with a sequence which they then erroneously call the genome of the virus. Every time they do it, they get a different result, which is
actually not, because every time they do it, after they find the sequence, they usually start with the same sequence again because they just make a clone of it. That's the reason why there is a SARS urbani strain that everybody starts with when they want to study SARS in a culture or SARS in an animal model. They just request the pure DNA construct from UNC and the Barrick laboratory, and they get it sent, and then they put that on a cell culture, and the cell culture likely just packages it up. And now you can transfect anything you need to transfect with that DNA and call it virology. And these people could have explained that to you in 2022, could have explained it to everyone in 2020 even, I presume, because they probably knew it before I did. But they didn't. And once I started talking about it, these people went bananas, and they still haven't said it. It makes them traitors, ladies and gentlemen.
why there's approximately, Andy might know this more than I, 5 million or 400,000 or 2 million different sequences, because every time you do the experiment, you get a different sequence. So anybody who says that's proper isolation simply has not familiarized themselves with either what they do or with the English language.
Now, good doctors, before anyone...
He's got no problems with the English language when it comes to vaccines, though. That's a normal term. He's got no problem with the English language when it comes to viruses. He just says they don't exist. Can you see it yet? The limited spectrum of debate is pretending that he's really semantically specific, you know. He only uses the words with the right definitions, and he's really insistent on it. Gosh, this guy's a fraud. It is just awful.
When else responds, let me play you the other clip to it, because the clip that you guys saw probably was on Rumble, I believe, but I don't think you guys saw this part.
I can tell you clinically, it's different than the flu. People making this argument says, well, it's just misdiagnosis of influenza. I think it's a very different clinical syndrome. A
misdiagnosis of influenza is actually something that a couple other people in the George Webb arena were doing, and made a killing on, including getting on Brett Weinstein to talk about it, arguing with Robert Malone about it in 2023. Cullen and Goodman, complete jokes. This is so damning to have these three people in a Brady Bunch shot. It's just ridiculous. It's an absolute admission that this narrative is being curated, that this script is being provided by people with 20 years of ties to all of these people. This guy worked with Rick Bright and spoke and then handed off the mic to Rick Bright in front of the WHO in 2011. There is no way that Robert Malone is a good guy, and thereby association, there is no way that this guy or that guy are good guys anymore. It's just impossible. They have not made any progress in 5 years. They have stuck to the narrative that never contradicted the guy from Ditra, David Hohn's best friend, who is supposedly vetted for U.S. AMRID, where Sina Bavari works, and has been on multiple Tommy podcasts with Stephen Hatfill, the first suspect in the anthrax letters, and the guy who was in Rhodesia for Ebola, around the same time that Meryl Nass was in Rhodesia for Ebola, way back when.
Stop lying!
X-ray and CT patterns are distinct. The thrombotic aspect of the illness, the laboratory pattern, it's distinct from influenza. SARS-CoV-2 is a real virus.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dr. Tom Cowan, Stefan Lanka, Dr. Andrew Kaufman, but these are three medical doctors that are talking about this kind of stuff. And they argue, why can't we isolate the virus through a density gradient centrifuge versus the way they're doing it now? Because they're putting all this other stuff in there, allowing it to decay. And I think Stefan Lanka was able to.
So it's a legitimate discussion. There are legitimate questions to be asked about why can't we do it this way? Why don't we do it that way? Is it a direct measurement or an indirect measurement? Is the indirect measurement enough? And so now we're going to hear a pretty reasonable counter from the illustrious Robert Malone.
Isolates something that looks like COVID with yeast. So that's a big thing that people have been talking about.
If they're producing something that has virus-like characteristics from yeast, it's likely to be a budded form or an exosome.
Oh, an exosome!
Stop lying!
Wow, it's weird that they were free to use that word, but don't use it anymore. What's an exosome, Robert Malone? I wonder.
In terms of density gradient, you need a lot of virus to pull a density gradient. Right. And the way that's typically done is you culture the virus for a long period of time, often in roller bottles, collect very small volumes of fluid. You may pass it through a filtration system to further concentrate the virus, and then put it on your gradient, whether it's a step gradient or a continuous gradient, and pull the band. That requires a heck of a lot of virus. That is absolutely not how you isolate a primary virion sample. The reason why you have to do it in the presence of the drugs is because you have the problem of contamination with mycoplasma, bacteria, etc., from primary clinical samples. And so you have to impose stringent criteria that will keep those things from overgrowing the cell layer while you're trying to grow out the virus and passage it. I don't wish to cast shade on my fellow colleagues. I don't know what their background is, but...
So he doesn't want to cast shade on his former colleagues. He doesn't know what their background is.
Stop lying!
I'm going to say it right here. I think that's an absolute lie, and the reason why is because I think they are actually on Robert Malone's script. I think it is most likely that Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan are the two people that have curated the script that all of these populist Bannonites are on. The script that Meryl Nass has been holding Children's Health Defense on, the script that Del Bigtree has been holding, the script that Wakefield has been running, was adopted and then modernized by Kevin McKernan and Robert Malone before the pandemic, and deployed in very similar fashion to how it was deployed in the early 2000s when Polly Tommy was on 90 billboards in her bra, saving no one, just getting 6 million votes for the right prime minister candidate. Make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen, these people probably wanted Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the White House and have settled for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. being in the Trump administration, but they are still there. They are still ultimately behind this. And that means that we are still being sabotaged from inside. We are still being misled by a coordinated Lollapalooza of liars. And at the heart of it is Robert Malone.
But these are classic virology isolation methods and techniques. There's nothing idiosyncratic here. And to isolate a virus by density gradient, you would require somebody to be incredible.
Somebody says that the video is not there, so I'm going to give you this one. This is the one on Rumble, Jeffrey. And then the Rumble video says that it's this one. So I copy, and the Rumble video says it's this link. So if that link doesn't work, let me see. I open that link and I get a video. So let's see. Maybe I dropped the wrong link in there, but that's the right one now. Let me see. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to let it go again. My voice is starting to die. I don't know why.
Virulent, just shedding very, very large amounts of virus. And you would have to have a body fluid that has that large amount of virus. And even then, I don't think it'd be possible.
You would have loved to be in my seat at that moment. Dr. Kaufman, how would you have responded to what Dr. Malone said at that point?
Well, and to isolate a virus by density gradient, you would require somebody to be incredibly virulent, just shedding very, very large amounts of virus.
And so again, reinforcing the whole cartoon mythology of what a virus does, right? It makes lots of copies of itself, and it goes through this lysogenic phase where it destroys cells, and then all these particles spray everywhere. This is a cartoon that is borrowed from bacteriophages that likely has absolutely no basis in reality for whatever respiratory diseases they are trying to explain. And yet, without even hesitation, he recites this ridiculous cartoon and then, seeds the narrative of shedding of lots of viral particles depending on how sick you are.
And you would have to have a body fluid that has that large amount of virus. And even then, I don't think it'd be possible.
With Ryan Cole nodding and laughing his head as if that skin biopsy guy knows anything about this.
You would have loved to be in my seat at that moment. Dr. Kaufman, how would you have responded to what Dr. Malone said at that point?
Well, let me start off by saying that, creating the appearance of a scary, deadly virus is a major tool in the toolbook of the, globalist empire, like the people.
And why not just say that Robert Malone works for that empire? Why not just say that Robert Malone has been involved with these people who are perpetuating this illusion for decades? Why not say that? And the reason why is because they're on the same team. The same reason why Robert Malone said very conspicuously, I don't know who these guys are or who's their background. Funny, I've never seen these guys before. Not since the last time we were sitting across the table from each other and shared a briefing lunch or a Zoom meeting before this started.
People behind the World Economic Forum and Agenda 2030 and other things like that. So they want to make sure.
So wait, Robert Malone has been presenting in front of the WHO. Why not point that out? Instead of immediately evoking all of these ghosts and all of these amorphous entities that we could possibly never oppose, why not just say that that actual asshole is the one we should be fighting? Because he works with him. That's why. That's why there's a picture of this man, Andy Kaufman, shaking hands with Andrew Cuomo in 2019, accepting a grant to make a biometric monitoring system for prisons. Yes, this guy. That's why. Because they are on the same team. Otherwise, you would dunk. He would say that the vaccine schedule's criminal. These people have known it. We've known it for a while. And they put somebody like Robert Malone out there specifically to make sure that nobody would usefully question this. But he doesn't say it at all. He's not worried about America being sabotaged or there being traitors on the internet that are lying about this. He's going to have a very calm discussion despite the fact that there's 2 years of murder in his home state of New York. Or is he from Vermont?
that even the people who maybe think it was been exaggerated or that they're concerned with health freedom, that they never spread this truth that there are no disease-causing viruses.
If there are no disease-causing viruses, then that makes the vaccine schedule pretty shitty criminal, doesn't it? That makes the vaccine schedule one mega lie. That makes the vaccine schedule some pretty terrifying shit for thousands of parents a day, doesn't it, Andy Kaufman? And yet your dumbass, your traitorous ass cannot say it for 5 years. This isn't the Easter stream that I would want to do if there was something to celebrate, but there isn't. We need our children to understand that the adults in this world are lost. They are lost because of skilled social media use and because they get ganged up on in social media. By acquiescing to social media, you submit yourself to conversations with 4 liars or 3 coordinated liars and a dupe. And what that results in is not good processing. You can't listen to 3 liars and then learn something. You can only listen to 3 liars and become trapped by them. And it's a hard truth. It's not for everyone, but it is for anyone that wants to see it. That is how they intend to govern our children. That is how they intend to enslave them.
Because then they won't be able to run this program again with the next scary, pandemic situation.
They will be able to run this until the vaccine schedule is ended, Andy Kaufman. Nobody needs to understand the subtleties of virology. They only need to understand synthetic recombinant DNA can be made in quantity, and they only need to understand that RNA cannot pandemic. And then you can explain to them why it is obvious that the vaccine schedule, the vaccine idea, is wrong. But no, Tom Cowan actually writes a book about vaccines. He doesn't explain that vaccines are dumb, why the word itself is stupid to use. Vaccine is one of the primary beautiful words in slave speak. Just like autism is. Once you argue about what autism is and where it comes from, you are enslaved by Brian Hooker's lies. You are enslaved by Mary Holland's lies. You are enslaved by Polly Tommy's lies. Autism is a lie. It's another thing that these guys could probably say if they wanted to, but they don't want to because they work for Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan and this malevolent force that is behind Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the health freedom movement.
But also, it's important. So none of these responses really, either they responded with something that was just simply not true, like that the virus has been purified, that Dr. Malone said. That's simply not true. Or they divert away from the actual subject. And part of that is because you didn't really ask a well-constructed question.
Isn't it important that Robert Malone has a history? Isn't it important that Robert Malone is not just the inventor of mRNA who retired to a horse farm in Northern Virginia? Isn't it important to understand who it is that he's arguing with? Or are we really to believe that Robert Malone doesn't know who Andy Kaufman is, doesn't know what their background is, and Andy Kaufman doesn't know who Robert Malone is in 2022 when he spoke out already in 2021 on the Brett Weinstein podcast? Are we really to believe that that is considered irrelevant to these guys, that they could discredit him with his history? They could discredit him with his 20-year history of working for the system that these people claim they've known for years is bullshit. But do they do it? No. It is because they are on his team, on his script.
Like you didn't really know what Dr. Lanka did in his experiments, so you described something that they didn't understand correctly. Like what he did is he ran the virus isolation experiment without a virus and produced cytopathic effects, which is the proof of the virus's presence in the body fluid. So how can you get the same result if there's no virus, if the virus is the cause of the result, and the result is the proof of a virus? So, you know, the question would be, hey, by those standard isolation procedures that you describe, can you explain how that proves there's a virus in the person?
Do these guys seem like they're trying to fight against something as nasty as a lie? Like, you know, vaccines are a lie. The whole medical, you know, foundation of medicine in America is just a scam. Do they really feel that important, that desperate? Or do these guys feel like pretty comfortable on their script? A lot more like people just, you know, reading the lines they were given. I think that's what I see.
Or can you address why they don't do control experiments? Isn't a control experiment a necessary part of a scientific experiment?
Here's the real bullshit. He can't even tell you what that control experiment would need to rule out. And what would it need to rule out in the new Biology 101? A source of the signal that was not bacteria or bacteriophage, the two broadest, largest sources of noise in the world of microgenetic signals. If you want to talk about packet information, DNA and RNA packaged and released as a general phenomenon that definitely exists in nature, by far and away, the biggest fraction of this observation is bacteriophages and bacteria. And so it would be pretty important for this person, if he was really serious about this fight, to explain that the background is hot. And why is the background hot? Because so much of those signals, such a large proportion of those genetic packet signals are actually just bacteriophages. And he's not going to say that at all, not even close.
But then the answers kind of led. So first of all, the leading answer was, of course.
No control experiment. He just says the control experiment should be done, but he gives you no examples which would belie an understanding of what's happening here. It's just a script.
That's well established. Yes, I believe there are viruses. I believe this virus is real. Now that doesn't mean anything scientifically, right? Because we can point to people who think they're real and people who don't think they're real.
Why would they be lying, Andy Kaufman? Why would they say those things? Just because they're dumb? Just because they don't get it? Or is it because the vaccine schedule in America is criminal? Intramuscular injection of any combination of substances with the intent of augmenting the immune system is dumb, and RNA cannot pandemic. But they would like to convert our children to experimental animals, and so they're lying about it. They're even willing to murder people in hospitals using supplementary oxygen or withholding antibiotics for viral diseases in order to accomplish that goal, and they've put somebody like Robert Malone dead center to do it. But this guy can't say that because he's working for them.
It's meaningless. It's giving away your opinion to someone else. Or just saying, this is my opinion, I just stated outright, but I have nothing to back it up. Now with Dr. McCullough, he gave clinical evidence. So he said he thinks people have a different pattern of disease with the flu this year compared to other years, or whatever you want to call it, a respiratory acute syndrome. But he didn't.
This is a psychiatrist who doesn't seem to understand that a 2-year campaign on social media to convince people that there was something new with the combination of bad protocols in hospitals could easily convince people that there was something new. A psychiatrist is not going to come to the conclusion that a large portion of this might just be a sort of induced assumption, right? He can't get there because that would be crazy, right? A psychiatrist would never know that.
And that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't tell you what causing it. So let's say he did notice something different clinically. How do you know that's not a different flu virus if you believe in flu viruses? How do you know it's not a different toxin, maybe a new food trend, maybe a new plastic used in
a new plastic in the environment, a new food trend in the environment. Again, a guy who doesn't seem to be able to differentiate between the acute exposure to a toxin injected versus ingested or inhaled. These people are as bad as Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan, because they are on a script given to them by them.
Consumer goods, there's no way to know what causes it by observing what you see clinically. So that's not, an argument that you can speak to this issue. Now, what Dr. Malone said there at the end about there's not enough material, that you'd have to have someone with real large viral shedding. Well, that just kind of doesn't make sense. There's not enough material to show the thing is a real thing. How could that not be? Like, if there's not enough in one person, couldn't you just get it from a group of people so that it's concentrated? And this thing about having to culture it, that also doesn't make.
But the problem is that even if there was a signal, Andy, you would be isolating it from an irreducibly complex background of bacterial signals that include bacteriophages. And bacteriophages and bacteria provide an irreducible background of genetic signals from which they never attempt to differentiate. And the reason why he can't tell you this is because then there would be a lot of different explanations for contagious disease. There would be a lot of different explanations for what these people are lying about, and you might figure it out, that they are actually lying to you about bacteriophages. Bacteriophages are the most abundant signal in nature at that size scale. And they are pretending that they don't exist. They are pretending that they are not a confounding factor in the isolation of a coronavirus RNA, which they most certainly are the primary confounding factor. They are primarily likely the source of the lie. And that is the reason why we have gut microbiome people involved in this since Andy Wakefield all the way up to Sabine Hazan talking about the bifidobacteria, but never once in all of the hours that she's spent on all of the podcasts she's ever been on has never mentioned bacteriophages, has never mentioned the possibility that the SARS-CoV-2 signal, whatever it is, the spike protein, could be a signal that is being found in bacteriophages. And we make no effort to differentiate from that. He's not going to say it either. Neither's Tom Cowan. Even though they all will acknowledge that bacteriophages are real, we know that because in a few months, Mark Bailey is going to go and argue on the Tim Truth podcast with none other than Kevin McCairn himself about viruses and virology. And there he will acknowledge that, of course, bacteriophages are real. I never said that they weren't real. But there's not one disease on Earth that's blamed on bacteriophages. And the only disease based on bacteria, I guess, is salmonella.
Makes sense, because if there's not enough
and anthrax, don't forget anthrax.
Person, how is it making them sick?
And TB,
and
don't forget
also,
TB.
How could it spread to someone else? Because if it goes through some body excretion, it's going to be diluted. So if you have a very little to begin with, not even enough to purify.
It's very simple, ladies and gentlemen. These people are presenting to you a limited spectrum of debate using the old bad biology where bacteria and bacteriophages and all the things that they do as a part of our hypersymbiotic self is irrelevant. Don't need to think about that at all. We just need to answer the questions that Robert Malone posed, because he's on the Robert Malone script.
It's sort of like, how are you going to have enough to spread the illness? Or how are you going to enough to spread throughout your lungs?
Well, actually, you can make a bunch using pharmaceutical grade recombinant DNA manufacturing techniques that are used as standard production of biologics, which is the reason why anybody that's worked in pharmaceuticals for any length of time would have known already that manufacturing a pure mRNA was bullshit, including Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan. Maybe even Jessica Rose, although I think she's kind of a stooge.
To make you sick, or all the other organs they say that it affects, right? They say it affects your olfactory, your sensory nerves, right? Your taste and smell. It can affect your kidneys. It can affect your blood system. How's it going to spread and cause all that damage if there's not even enough of it to like show under an electron microscope, which shows things that are nanometers?
Show under electron microscope. That other guy just got through telling us that those pictures are dumb. The contradictions that they do amongst the team is even it's even built into the script. It's that way on purpose.
In size. It just doesn't really add up. Like the reason they use the isolation procedure that they use now is because they couldn't actually show these things are real. So they had to fudge it. And then it just cost.
It's so funny, right? Why would they do this? Is it just for money? Why would they do it? Why would they be committing these murder and lies? And why aren't they talking about the murder? They're just talking about the lies, and then only a few of them. And then they're not trying to explain to you why in the world would all these people do it. Is it not significant that it's not just some random doctor? It's Robert Malone. Andrew Kaufman doesn't give a shit because he's getting paid by them.
On because it was convenient and it made tons of money and it made.
Don't forget that a year ago or so in 2024, right after I gave my red pill presentation in 2024, Andrew Kaufman did the Steve Kirsch podcast. Steve Kirsch is the guy who went on Brett Weinstein's podcast in June of 2021 with Robert Malone. Steve Kirsch is one of the largest private donors to the Democratic National Committee before the pandemic. Yes, this guy went on his podcast last year, right after I presented the Red Pill Expo, where I said, these people are all lying.
People's careers. And these guys, they asked about the credentials, but none of them are virologists either. You know, Dr. Malone, he contributed to inventing this vaccine technology. That's pretty much what's being used to.
A vaccine technology, also a guy who doesn't seem to be able to say transfection because he's on Robert Malone's script. And he's giving credit. I guess he did invent the vaccine. That's pretty cool.
Stop lying!
It's really obvious, and it should be really obvious, that this guy is not attacking Robert Malone at all. No. He's promoting him.
Harm and kill people right now. So, you know, you have to think about that. I don't know if that was his intention, but that's how the technology is being used at present.
How? Why? How is the technology being used to kill and harm people? Why would they do that? Why isn't everybody dying then? They're not going to suggest placebo, of course, because intramuscular injection of any combination of substances with the intent of augmenting the immune system is so dumb that they would never actually get away with it without placebo.
Can I just add something here? You know, the question to ask him is, so if you're saying you have to culture the virus.
No, the question you have to ask him is why is intramuscular injection of a lipid nanoparticle coated RNA a good idea? How does that usefully augment a healthy human, whether elderly or a kid? But that's not at all what this guy, who supposedly knows that the vaccine schedule in America is a criminal enterprise, a fake fraud, and injuring thousands of kids a day. This is what he says.
And you go into viral theory, which is you have this so-called particle that goes and uses your lungs as a culture, right? That's what they say. Why isn't your lungs a culture? Why do you have to culture it in a petri dish or a roller tube, right? And the answer is there's no sense in that at all. We, according to conventional viral theory, are a culture medium. That's the whole point. And nobody asks him, well, if you want to culture it, why isn't your lung a culture? Now, the other thing I thought of, and maybe Mark or Andy can help me with this, I don't know how much virus you would need to see or need to have in order to see a band. But let's say it's the drop that's a tenth of a pinhead, right? That's a guess. But it's a small amount. Now, they tell us that viruses do their damage by mechanical disruption of the cells, right? It's not like arsenic where it's chemical. So let's say it was a pinhead, because you could see a pinhead on an ultracentrifuge band. So there's the amount of virus let's say, is a pinhead. Now, if you just removed a pinhead.
Does this really sound like a guy who has a big message, which is that we've got to stop injecting children for nothing? We've got to stop injecting children for nothing. It's damaging our children for nothing. Does this sound like a guy whose message is that? Or does this sound like a guy who is actually reading a script that will never get to the actual finish line, which would be public health is fake, the vaccine schedule is a lie, viruses are a myth. Save your children. No utility drawer analogies would be necessary indeed. But for years and years and years, this fake person engaged in this limited spectrum of debate with pleasure, with a smile on his face, laughing about it.
That amount of your lungs, you know what would happen? Nothing. Nothing. If you removed a baseball-sized amount of your lungs, you have a bad day and then you recover. There is no possible way that a particle that you cannot see in a band on an electron microscope that does its damage mechanically by bursting cells could possibly cause illness. It's nonsense.
And that's where I think there's some confusion with around the different techniques that are used. Like the electron microscope can't tell you too much about the biological role of the particles.
What can the electron microscope tell you about intramuscular injection relative to your understanding of human physiology, Mark Bailey? You were an MD before you quit because you didn't think that the system was right. So now that you've been reading on your own, what is your understanding of the human physiology that makes vaccines so dumb? Guess he doesn't have any opinion about that. He's just gonna, farewell to virology.
Which is currently what they're doing. They're taking these pictures and saying, well, that's a virus. But there's no way from
the consequences of this lie, Mark Bailey, are the vaccine schedule in the West. Every baby that gets injected in New Zealand is injected because you have failed to inform people that the consequences of what you say is bullshit is that vaccines are bullshit. That the idea of vaccination is bullshit. But they're not going to say it. They use the word vaccine repeatedly because they are reinforcing the slave speak, because they are employed and running the script of Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan.
That they can demonstrate that virus has a particular biological property. All they can do is talk about the morphology. Back in the day, with the purified particles, you'd then perform your biological experiments. So then you'd try and infect something. But it was very specific. You had to have purified particles. You couldn't do it.
So he's saying right here that there are examples where they have purified particles and then been able to show infection. He's saying it right here. A lot of those examples are bacteriophage, that's true, but there are examples.
But with the cell culture, which contained all sorts of other material, antibiotics, etc., various cell line types. You had to have the absolute purified particles. And not only that, you had to perform control experiments. So you had to take a comparative control, go to another human or animal, take some samples, and show that you could not get the same results, that you couldn't get these same particles. And once they were purified, you wouldn't get the same biochemical results when you start doing the analysis. And at that point, once you've done all this, you try and infect a new animal or host and see if you can replicate the process all over again. But we all know that they're not even close to establishing these properties. So we can conclude that there is absolutely no evidence of SARS-CoV-2, just as there is absolutely no evidence of any other pathogenic particles that behave like viruses.
Dr. Kaufman, in hindsight, you're right. I should have asked certain questions differently, especially about the controlled group. Why wasn't there in any of this isolation processes?
It is remarkable that now we have 3 MDs who have come to some conclusion that there are no viruses that cause contagious disease, but they are unable to then state that that makes the idea of vaccination dumb, especially intramuscular. They're unable to say it. And I think, without a doubt, I would put all my chips on the fact that this means that these people are traitorous saboteurs of what otherwise would have been a truth movement, would have otherwise been an anti-vaccine movement. These people are as bad as Mary Holland and Merrill Nass and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whether he's wittingly or unwittingly involved. That guy is part of this. Because by now, after this many years and after having employed me for a year and a half, Brian Hooker can't say he doesn't know. Mary Holland can't say she doesn't know. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. can't say he doesn't know that RNA cannot pandemic, that intramuscular injection is just plain dumb, and that these were always transformation and transfections. And that's why everybody who knew those terms already, like Brian Hooker, like Merrill Nass, like Robert Malone, like Kevin McKernan, are traitors for not having used those terms in 2020 immediately.
But do you guys generally think that these doctors have bad intentions, though? Because I think that personally, when I look at the people in my neck of the woods, even my neighbors and some of my clients have been saying, wow, you're not crazy after all. I saw Robert Malone on Joe Rogan. So for those reasons, I actually think that these people have done some good for our movement. But I understand from your perspective that if the core basis of the argument is that this virus hasn't been isolated, so it doesn't exist, and these guys are perpetuating the lie here, I could see from your standpoint why that's not a good thing. But overall, if the end game is for us to win, isn't it a good thing that they're waking up humanity?
Well, Joe, first of all, I don't think ill of anyone who is trying to talk about health freedom in general, the ability to make your own choices about these things. And
Stop lying! Stop lying! Stop lying!
There it is right there. So even though thousands of children are being poisoned every day in America, and even though Tom Cowan has known it since at least the publication of his book, apparently, since this guy's known it for like 2.5 years, he's been speaking out, apparently. Up until this point, none of them have been able to succinctly explain why in the world would anybody lie about murder? Why in the world would anybody lie about intramuscular injection being called a vaccine? Gosh, I hope it's as obvious to you as it is to me that these people are so malevolently
And of course,
involved.
it's also very positive when people are telling at least some of the truths about the.
So Robert Malone is telling some of the truth. Peter McCullough and Ryan Cole are telling some of the truth. And so it's a limited spectrum of debate being curated by one team worst case scenario with little separate sub teams that Kevin McCairn agrees that this is the worst guy on the internet. Kevin McCairn makes memes about his wife, but then he's going to go on a stream with him and talk to him, even though a guy made memes about his wife with hot dogs in her mouth. He went on a stream with him to discuss virology again. Not the vaccine schedule, not just isolation, purification, and culturing of viruses. A few months after this video, as far as I can tell. In 2022, when all the murder was over, when I had already lost my job for 2 years, when I had just been hired by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to start working on this book, which would end up having an awful lot of the evidence in there, including the Sina Bavari Tortura paper, and including several statements by me explaining why they would never even need a virus. They just need the recombinant DNA and a spectacular commitment to lies. A spectacular commitment to lies that would include people like Tom Cowan, Mark Bailey, and Andrew Kaufman.
Toxicity and danger of the injectable vaccine products. And
I mean, imagine going on a stream and discussing virology with somebody who had called your wife Bimbo Bailey for a year with multiple memes with hot dogs in her mouth. Because that's what Mark Bailey did when his handlers told him that he had to go on the Tim Truth podcast and talk to Kevin McCairn, the guy who had been making memes about his wife that included Bimbo Bailey being a gift that came up when he got a donation. That's how you can see that Mark Bailey has capitulated to this multinational bullshit narrative that is being coordinated by Kevin McKernan and Robert Malone. Because instead of defending the honor of his wife and having a debate about the virus with anybody else, he did exactly what he was told and had a debate with Kevin McCairn on the Tim Truth podcast in 2022. That's how much of a coward script reader he is.
And, maybe there is some good to come out of some of these things, but I would also say, like, if you only think something is worth looking into because you see it on Joe Rogan, then there's really a deeper problem that we should be talking about, which is how do you learn information?
Well, it's not from him. That's for sure. It's not from him. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm going to move on because they've made their point. I don't know how far that video goes. You can see it if you want. Together, these people are on a script. You're not going to be able to change it. You can even get on stage and interact with them, but they're going to stay on their script. The next act is the next act. And it is that spectacular commitment to that script that makes it obvious that these people are traitors. They will never explain to you that making a pure mRNA was never possible. They will never explain to you how advantageous it would be to everything in this narrative to have rolled out a huge majority of placebos. You can meet any manufacturing quota like that, and you can make a perfect PCR positive with synthetic pure DNA. And that would be enough to seed all the narrative you'd need. You could even take that and misconstrue a background by putting that PCR pure product somewhere, like in Wuhan with an agent, and have her report the sequence that you wanted to claim was found, and then go from there. Maybe even put somebody like Robert Malone on the internet with a couple buddies like Andrew Kaufman to pretend to argue with him. Transfection was always a crime. Transformation in healthy people was a crime. And that's why these people are never going to say it. They're never going to say placebo. This is how it was done. They're never going to tell you that endemicity is really dumb. And that would be another thing that somebody like Tom Cowan, after 5 or 6 years of being aware, should have gotten to by now. But it's the lack of progress that shows you he's a liar.
Stop lying!
And so the background, to understand this beautiful background of bacteria and archaea and all of their bacteriophage communication that's going on, that covers us, surrounds us, and we bathe in. Ladies and gentlemen, with simple, non-specific PCR tests and a spectacular commitment to lie about what that background is, never talking about bacteria and bacteriophages, never talking about archaea and the phages that infect them, and just talking about bifidobacteria. Ladies and gentlemen, RNA cannot pandemic intramuscular injection is dumb. Healthy people should never have been transfected or transformed. And the population pyramid is a problem that needed managing, and they took advantage of to create this mythology. Thank you very much for being here on an Easter. I'm sorry it wasn't more positive, but it is. It's positive because you can see it so clearly now, and anybody can see it. The left and the right can see it. Your friends and family can see it, as long as you can show it to them. Ladies and gentlemen, this is GigaohmBiological.com, where you can find a way to support this work. It would really be appreciated. We are trying to get out a new Biology 101 in the form of lectures, in the form of journal clubs, and in the form of a textbook. So we got a lot of work to do, and we need a lot of support. If you want to share this video, please share the video on stream.gigaohm.bio, because we pay for that. I don't know, if you can support us and you can't support financially, please just try to share the work in a place that you haven't shared it before, or try to get in a habit of sharing it regularly via email with all your family and friends. The only way out is for us to teach this to our kids so that they can teach it to their kids. Otherwise, they will inherit social media, and they will inherit the slavery that's built within it. Thank you very much for being here, and I'll see you again very soon, probably tomorrow. Look at this guy work. Rebound. Rebound tip. Never stop. Never stop, ladies and gentlemen. Never stop until the ball's dead. Go, go, go. Yes! I love you guys. I'll see you again very soon. Yeah, baby. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you again soon.